All right, everybody. Hello, good afternoon, good morning, whenever, however you're listening. Hopefully, you're doing well. Lots going on in the world, lots to talk about. And I'm very excited to be back with you on this wonderful Sunday afternoon to talk with all of you about it. Would have been live a little bit earlier, but I'm going to kind of do these live streams as my schedule permits. And may not be exactly a consistent time every week, but I'll do my best to make sure I get a show out every single Sunday, and usually post maybe a clip or two throughout the week. That's just going to be the way I do things, whether I have a guest or not, because yeah, scheduling guests can be a little bit of a pain in the ass. And as much as I love all the guests that I have, there's some people who'll probably be on frequently, but I'm not going to continue to sit here and just beg and plead and try to work around other people's schedules. I'm going to do my show. If people can show up for it, then cool. If not, no big deal. I'm going to keep doing it. So, really today, I want to talk about the Trump Xi summit, talk about US China relations, because that's something that I like to focus on quite a bit. I feel like that's one of the most important fronts because that is what the US empire's final boss, if you will, is a dear friend of the show, Misty Winston, always says. So I choose to focus on that because, like I said, it seems to me pretty pertinent. And there are a lot of China hawks in the Trump administration. But today will actually seemingly be a little bit more optimistic than usual. I also have a story about Venezuela and what's going to be going on there, what we might see here sooner or later. So, looking forward to connecting a lot with you. A story about Israel breaking the ceasefire in Gaza and also some other stuff. Hey, Jay Forte, good to see you as always. So, lots to talk about. Life is going very, very well, by the way. Um, I don't know if I mentioned it on the last show, but I did get a Warhammer from Hell. So it's just a brand new guitar from a company called Firefly. They make rip-off Wild Audios while they're not obviously the same quality as an actual Wild Audio, like the Odin that is sitting right there. It's the second one in. So that's the custom made one, and then that's my Wild Audio that my finger's hovering over right there. That guitar is about $900. The Wild Audio, I'm sorry, Firefly Warhammer from Hell was brand new, about 280 bucks, and I bought it on eBay because they sold out very, very fast for about 600 bucks. Anyways, put new pickups in it. My one service advisor is also a big musician guy, had helped me get everything set up. So that's really, really cool. So in the Matovcik household, life is very, very good, and I've zero complaints. I'm starting to get sucked back into Twitter, which isn't good, but I've been able to moderate it a little bit more, and it's not like the first thing I do as soon as I wake up, or at least not as much as I used to. So, but yeah, like I said, lots of stuff going on in the world. So hopefully you all will sit here and join me and enjoy listening, and also learn a few things along the way. So before we get into the rest of today's show, let me do my usual shilling. Of course, make sure you go to tigerfitness.com through the link below, tigerfitness.com slash Kyle M. They have their Halloween sale going on right now, so you can get 15% off, and I think you get double rewards points on all purchases. Use code Kyle at checkout if they don't have a Halloween code, that is. So yeah, make sure you go do that. Get all the supplements to keep you jacked and tan. It has been a minute since I placed a Tiger Fitness order. I bought in bulk last time. I bought a lot of stuff, so I have stuff for quite a while. I think I still have some pre-workouts and stuff rolling around downstairs. But yeah, definitely go check all that stuff out. I think they have a pretty cool looking shirt. It's like a I want to say tiki isn't the right word, but it's reminiscent of like the dragons that you would see on like Chinese wall art or whatever. The tiger kind of looks like that, so it looks really cool if you get the special stack from Tiger Fitness. So I definitely recommend going and checking that out. And like I said, get all the supplements to keep you all jacked and tan. Go to foxsonscoffee.com. Use code Kyle at checkout to let them know that I sent you. Absolutely wonderful coffee, and my wife will tell you that as well. She's been drinking a ton of it. So that's really, really cool. We haven't gone to Donut Connection every here and there because Donut Connection is definitely better than Dunkin' Donuts, but neither here nor there. What else do I got? Deem fit through the link below, commoncrown.com. And please make sure, if you are a heavy metal fan, go check out the Great Megalodon on Substack. That is my Substack, where I publish album reviews, thought pieces. The next review I'm going to be getting up, hopefully this week, if I get the time, is a review of Testament's Parabellum. I reviewed Seven Dust Seasons, Times of Grace, Hymn of a Broken Man, tons and tons of stuff going on the Great Megalodon. So please make sure you go check that out. And shout out to new channel member, my dear friend Rachel Wilson. I hope all is well for you. God bless you. I hope the family's doing well. Thank you so much for becoming a channel member. And I guess that gets me to the next point. Please consider becoming a channel member for the lowly price of $2.99 a month to support the Matovcik family and everything we've got going on over here. You get access to ad-free podcasts as well as all the Common Crowns performances and good stuff like that. I'm going to be doing more podcasts, probably pre-recorded, so I'll be publishing those. For members only, unedited, all that good stuff before anybody else gets to see them. That's going to be coming in the near future. I do have a pretty cool guest who we're trying to work things out. He's on the road right now, but that'll be coming here sooner or later. And of course, another thing about A Common Crown is that we did get back one of our songs, and it sounds absolutely killer. I can't wait to share it with everybody. I kind of have to go in to finish some stuff up, so I'll be going in about 3 weeks to go finish up the last of my stuff. Jen, I believe, has to go in and lay vocals for 4 more songs instead of just 5. Um, and me and the drummer might do some other tracks. So we have a whole ton of stuff coming your way. And I'm definitely thinking we'll have at least one song out before the end of the year. I've been saying it all year that we'll have new music out before the end of the year, and I plan to make good on that. I'm going to do everything in my damn power to make good on that. So, anyways, without all that stuff, now we are good. So, everybody, thank you so much for being here. Please hit the like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. It would mean a lot to me. And let's get into the rest of today's show. All right. There we go. That took a second to load up. So the first story I wanted to share, and you could see that I'm always looking at guitars, which just absolutely cracks me up. This was originally from the Atlantic, and as I talked about in the beginning, this seems a little grim, but I would be what the hell is going on here? To the grift that would be talking about being bearish on Trump, essentially. The rest of the show, I promise, is going to be as black pilled as some might accuse me of normally being. And Conroe, what's up, everybody? Been busy with life and staying off X for almost 2 weeks. Has been a benefit to getting things done. Yes, I did it for about 3 or 4 weeks, and can't recommend the Twitter breaks and the internet breaks enough. Seriously, the U.S. is on track to lose a war with China. So this article is going to cover kind of the drone warfare between China and the US because both of them are kind of developing drone technologies and different abilities of dealing with warfare in a modern context, because it's no longer about, or at least not as much about, placing troops on the ground as it is having the most advanced technologies readily available to deploy and kill people with technology. I mean, that's what Palantir, the Where's Daddy program and some of the stuff they're testing in Ukraine. So let's get into the rest of this article. I actually had to go on Yahoo to get it because the Atlantic wanted you to pay for that, and I'm sorry, I'm just not. I'm not paying for that. The Atlantic Daily Newsletter. The Atlantic Daily, a newsletter that guides you through the biggest stories of the day, helps you discover new ideas and recommends the best in culture. Sign up for it here. In his address to generals and admirals late last month, the Secretary of Defense, or Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, vividly described his vision of how wars are won. Soldiers and sailors are prepared to ship out in the dead of night, in fair weather or foul, to go to dangerous places to find those who would do our nation harm and deliver justice on behalf of the American people in close and brutal combat if necessary. In this profession, he went on, you feel comfortable inside the violence so that our citizen can live peacefully. Lethality is our calling card, and victory our only acceptable end state. Which the country that we're talking about here doesn't have that same desire towards the US that seemingly we feel towards them. But anyways, This stress on bravery and lethality in hand-to-hand fighting evoked Spartan and Roman warriors who stared their enemies in the eye and killed them with spears or swords. But the U.S. military is not going to confront the Athenians or Carthaginians in its next war, and the result of this war will not be determined by individual valor. Indeed, if the United States goes to war with China, its closest competitor and greatest geopolitical challenger, the bravery of the soldiers on both sides will largely be irrelevant, which is kind of what I was saying earlier. Since the beginning of the 20th century, industrial scale wars have been won through superiority in production capacity, logistics, and technological mastery. So I think everybody knows now, and I think I talked about this a little bit with Warwick Powell. Sorry. 1 second. I have a garbage can underneath the desk, and if I throw a pop can down underneath the desk while everybody's watching, you're gonna hear a loud bang. And well, I want to protect yours as much as possible. Um, China is currently the manufacturing powerhouse of the world right now. Back in, the 20th century, we had basically shipped off a lot of the stuff there because of regulations, because, Nixon wanted to regulate with China, and all that stuff had kind of eventually culminated in what was the manufacturing sector in the US shutting down, and a lot of the manufacturing being now done over in China. People say free trade, tariffs, blah, 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 whatever. But now the reality on the ground is that China is the manufacturing superpower of the world. The US is actually the second largest manufacturer of things in the world, but we manufacture military goods. We don't produce things that generally make people's lives better. We produce things that can make people's lives safer, but we largely produce weapons of war, which are used to kill people in soon to be Nigeria, Venezuela, Somalia, which Trump has struck Venezuela, or I'm sorry, not Venezuela, Somalia almost 90 times now this year, which if you're following the great Dave DeCamp, which we're going to be reading a story or two from him here today, you would know that. So China is now seeking to kind of compete against the US in this respect, because now they realize that, as this article says, the wars are no longer fought with hand to hand combat. They're now fought through war, or through different means, technological means, production, war machines, drones, planes, stuff like that. Technology. It's no longer hand to hand, or even two soldiers in trenches shooting at each other. It's not the way that warfare happens anymore. So, anyways, let me get this back up. If Hegseth and other US military planners think they're going to defeat China through ferocity and close combat, they're fooling themselves. The course of Russia's war in Ukraine, which looks more and more like the prototype for wars of the near future, is being determined not by the valor or lethality of the average infantryman, but by the ability of Ukraine and its allies to inflict pain on the Russian economy and to waste Russian battlefield and home front resources through the manufacture of millions of drones, artillery shells, and long range weapon systems, which is what I was just talking about. Such equipment is now being used to attack oil refineries, power plants, and other targets hundreds of thousands of miles behind the front lines. So this is kind of, I mean, I think everybody knows this. And Tom Luongo and I actually kind of talked about this a little bit when he was on the show last, is that the way that Russia is fighting the war in Ukraine is that they could have destroyed a whole bunch of bridges and basically isolated Ukraine, and then had just bombed the living shit out of them in their home territory. But that's not really the way that you would win the war, because you can drain the West's resources by leaving those bridges up, sending the troops across, getting them to waste a lot of ammo, and then killing their troops once they get there. And once again, I'm not making a moral claim of this either which way. My default position is that I want these wars to end, and I want as little people as possible to die in any of these conflicts, because it doesn't forward humanity for us to have these wars like this, and especially not when the US is funding it to the tune of hundreds of billions of dollars. And Ukraine is basically acting as a breakaway province, and everybody knows Ukraine can't win. It's funny. Red Hawk, friend of the show and dear friend of mine, he always talks about how military guys that are like in the military and super, bro, and know everything about military strategy, they never seem to get the military stuff right, because there is a certain somebody, well, fuck it, Mike Sartain, who, like him, love him, whatever. I have mixed feelings about him. I'm sure he's a decent enough guy in person. I enjoy watching his show over here and there. But I remember him saying pretty early on in the war that Ukraine was going to win against Russia, which, I mean, just like if you look at this on a map, it's completely obvious to anybody with a brain that Ukraine would never win against Russia. And the amount of people that Russia has just makes this completely obvious. And a country that's, I think it's like 1/16 the size of the United States against Russia, it's not going to happen. So a lot of these military guys predicted that Ukraine would win the war, but I mean, anybody with half a brain knew that just wasn't true. Anyways, as I argue in my new book, which I'm guessing is from the perspective of the author, War and Power, Who Wins and Why, generations of military leaders and powerful nations have long made fundamental errors in thinking about what prepares a state to win a war. Many of those mistakes reflect in what we might call a battle centric understanding of conflict, an assumption that outcomes are determined by what happens when troops meet in the field. In this line of thinking, a war may turn on a decisive battle, often in the war's early stages, which one side suddenly renders the other's position untenable. In modern warfare, though, most battles are not contests for control of areas, immense strategic importance, and they almost never destroy equipment in quantities that determine the outcome of wars. Rather than deciding wars, individual battles reveal war's course by showing how different militaries are generating forces and adapting to changing conditions. Today's wars are decided less by the military capabilities that each side has at the start than by the participants' ability to generate new forces and adapt to new technologies and work in coordination with allies, which once again is kind of what we're talking about here, where Ukraine has only been able to last as long as they have because the West have collectively come and decide that they're going to prop them up to the best of their ability and make sure they can fight off Russia to the best of their ability. It's no longer about just, killing as many people as possible. It's technological, it's psychological. So, anyways, continuing on. At the start of World War One, many major European powers presumed that they could quickly end the conflict by overwhelming their enemy in early battles. Most famously, Germany's Schlieffen Plan was based on the premise that the German army could swiftly defeat the French army and seize Paris, driving France out of the war and allowing the Germans to turn the mass of their army on Imperial Russia. Events did not work out that way. Instead of ending before Christmas 1914, as parties on both sides of the hostilities had predicted, a war of attrition went on for more than 4 years, drew in soldiers from around the globe, and killed many millions of people, which kind of is what's going on right now in Ukraine. In World War II, individual battles, even those remembered as the most important, rarely destroyed much equipment relative to how much was being produced at the time. In 1943, for instance, the German Soviet armies fought the largest tank battle at the War of Kursk, an event frequently described as the turning point in the war. Yet during the most intense phase of engagement, the opening 10 days, Germany lost only approximately 300 tanks, most of which were older, less efficient models. At that time, Germany was producing tanks at a pace of 11,000 a year. Holy crap. The obsolescent models destroyed at Kursk were soon replaced by more modern tanks, increasing the average quality of the German tank fleet. What decided World War II in the end was that over the course of several years, the Soviet Union and its key allies, the United States and Britain, were together able to generate and sustain better forces than Germany could ever hope to match. So basically, what they're saying in that paragraph is just that they were able to, completely overmanufacture and overman them. It's not quite the case anymore. It's going to be the case that whoever has the most technologically advanced manufacturing capabilities and military is going to be the one who's probably going to decide how war goes, how it ends, and the course of it. Anyways, let me continue on here. Like World War II, the war in Ukraine has turned into a long, brutal struggle of forced generation and destruction. Before launching its full-scale invasion in February 2022, Russia, as well as many outside analysts, believe that its superior stock of tanks, warships, and other vehicles would crush the Ukrainians in short order. The war might be effectively decided in hours and could end in a few days, with the Russians in control of Kiev and Ukrainian leaders fleeing for their lives. This was a tragic misunderstanding of the war. Instead, Ukraine fought back effectively, and the war lengthened and metastasized, and it led to more than 1 million casualties for Russia alone, which obviously they're not telling you how many casualties were for Ukraine, but I think everybody's willing to admit it's probably more on the Ukrainian side than it is on the Russian side. In the past 3.5 years, both sides have constantly had to build up new forces with new weapons and keep them supplied in the field. The armies of 2025 now bear little resemblance to the armies of 2022. Initially, drones were mostly an afterthought, and both sides deployed tanks, armored personnel carriers, and in some cases, mass infantry near the front. The Ukrainians have used drones and missiles to sink many of Russia's largest surface vessels in the Black Sea and driven the rest back to port. Both countries are bombarding each other to the most nightly long range drones. By the time the war is ultimately decided, both militaries will have been destroyed and reconstructed many times. This is exactly what happens in most wars. These dynamics do not bode well for the United States in a long war with China. Right now, the US has what appears to be a more capable military and certainly more battle tested, technologically advanced one. It might inflict disproportionately higher losses on the Chinese at first, but because of its diminished production capacity, the US would struggle to make up even a small part of the battlefield losses that would inevitably suffer. China, which is as much of the workshop of the world today as the United States was in World War II, could churn out replacement weaponry at, sorry, at an impressively quick pace. And I think that's kind of clear to a lot of people now that everybody says cheap Chinese junk, which I am a little bit biased with the guitar behind me. Maybe I'll grab that at one point or another, but I do love my cheap Chinese junk. As much as people want to knock it, I'll tell you what, man, that Firefly is one hell of a guitar. And I know that's not that doesn't epitomize all things done in China, because there's obviously like quality control issues where maybe actually there is some quality control issues with this one, because like the switch for the pickup selector switch in it is bad. It's a brand new guitar. I mean, literally, when they shipped it to me, the person bought it, kept it in the box, and then resold it to me. There was some wiring issue, or no, the switch itself was bad, and the whammy bar, which this is one I bought off Amazon. It's not the right one, but um, there's supposed to be a little bushing right here, which for those listening, it's literally right in like the middle of the part that threads into the guitar. That bushing was loose in there, and actually the whammy bar had broke. It bent and then broke when we were trying to set it up. So obviously some quality control issues, but there's no denying that they're manufacturing stuff at a very, very rapid pace and a lot of things. And honestly, a lot of stuff's quality. There was a video going around of, I think it's Steve Jobs, talking about why he still manufactures in China. And he said it's not because um, they're cheap anymore. He said it's because that's just where the quality of engineers are. I made this point many, many times before, but I believe the US could do that again. I believe the people in this country are capable of doing that. The people in China are clearly capable of doing it. And I think that if we brought this country back, manufacturing equipment, plants, and gave it some time and some knowledge and really got people working in these factories, we could definitely become another manufacturing superpower for stuff that isn't just weapons. Uh, that's just not in the cards right now, or at least, that doesn't seem like a realistic thing, because who's doing that? You can't. I'm sorry, I'm just not convinced that the tariffs are doing that. The tariffs are meant to incentivize local consumption, which I believe is a good thing. I think it's a dumb way to do it, but it's one way to do it. But as we're going to talk about in the next story, this trade war is all over the place, and Trump. I was listening to Carl Zaw, another friend of the show. He always calls he says tacos, Taco Thursday, Taco Tuesday, where Trump always chickens out. And that's essentially what he has done with the trade war with China. So, anyways, let's continue on here. Controlling shipping in the Pacific Ocean would likely be the first task for the U.S. military, but the U.S. mostly lacks a shipbuilding industry. In 2024, for instance, the United States built 0.1% of the world's ship tonnage, according to a recent Center for Strategic and International Studies analysis. Chinese shipyards built more than 50%. Now, to be clear, this also doesn't mean this is all military ships. That's just ships overall. The U.S. has allowed its shipyards to close and lost generations of shipbuilding engineering expertise, and it now has hardly any experienced shipbuilding workers outside of a few shipyards that supply the U.S. Navy. It would have to recreate all this expertise, which would take years before it could start producing ships at a fraction of the Chinese output. Which that's another thing. I know I've talked about it, and if you go to Scott Horton's show and look up the shows he's done with Lyle Goldstein, they talk about what a US war with China would kind of look like, in the respect that if we were to send aircraft carriers over to, let's say, the Taiwan Strait to try and do an assault on Beijing in that respect, we would lose 3,000 people. I think it's in the first month. And they never factor in nuclear escalation, which China only has, I think, if I remember correctly, about 500 nukes. The US has, I think it's 3 or 4,000. Russia has 5 to 7,000. Some of these numbers might not be perfectly accurate. This is just what I recall Scott talking about. I think it was on Provoked last week or when he was on Danny Davis's show, which Daniel Davis, if anybody has his contact info, he is welcome on the show anytime. His show is fantastic. Highly recommend you go check that out. But of course, after the stream. So, um, Lau Goldstein has gone through these war games because he was somebody that used to work for, I think it was a Reagan administration. But either way, he has always done these Navy War College papers where they kind of test out how a maritime war with China would go. Let's say in the situation that they'd want to defend Taiwan, and every single time, 100 times out of 100, U.S. loses because Taiwan's 7,000 miles away. So, how do we think we're going to be able to get all of our bravest young men over 7,000 miles away off a aspiring breakaway province that's only about 80 miles off the coast of China? I mean, we can arm Taiwan to the teeth, but the fact is, China's got over a billion people. We don't have that many people that would be, anywhere near the manpower that would take to fight China. Now, you could argue that the US is more efficient at creating military equipment, which I would say is probably true because we've been at it for so long. China isn't really aspiring to make military equipment as much as they are aspiring to just make regular goods. And plus, I think Xi Jinping is more of just trying to keep the billion people that he's responsible for, all taken care of and try to make sure that just everything in his country is going well. We don't have that same problem here in the United States. Like we have a massive immigration problem where there's tons of people who shouldn't be here that are here. And honestly, I think there's a radical leftist problem in this country. But that pales in comparison to trying to control, 1 billion people. China's managing to do it all right. I mean, they have, I think it's like 50 or 60% ownership of homes for people under the age of 30 or something like that. So, like, basically, someone my age would own their home outright, which to me is just like if someone came up to you and they were 25 years old and they said, "Yeah, I own my home outright," you would look at them like they got six heads because you had never heard anything like that in your entire life. In China, that's half the population there. So it's a completely separate tangent, but basically, the U.S. is the world's largest manufacturer of military equipment, whereas China is just the largest manufacturer of like everything. So, but as I was saying, Lau Goldstein does a lot of these war games, and he's got an open invitation on the show anytime as well. But basically, we lose the war on China every single time. Shipbuilding is just one industry in which the U.S. production would struggle to keep up. For China, for instance, controls 90% of the world's commercial drone production and supplies many of the components that are being put into both Ukrainian and Russian drones today. American wealth helps only so much. States cannot simply throw money at a problem to create a productive strategic industries in a short period. To compound the issue for the U.S., its allies are even less prepared militarily, and Washington currently is going out of its way to alienate them instead of foreseeing the cohesion necessary to deter or fight China. Which I think that would be up for debate. Every 4 years we go through this absolutely insane thing, unless it's an 8-year presidency. But now, Joe Biden was president for 4 years, and honestly, he took a lot more of an aggressive approach to what they would call the Indo-Pacific or China than Trump did. And we're going to cover Trump's approach to Xi Jinping in the next story. But really, they were focused on developing AUKUS, um, more strategic ties with the Philippines, obviously Japan, South Korea. Um, the US is kind of doing this thing, and they did the same thing with Russia as well. They're trying to militarily encircle both Russia and China because they see them as peer competitors, which I understand, but they also see them as military threats. So the goal is really to have nuclear submarines in Australia, South Korea. Japan is going to have some military equipment. And then, now Trump had blew up relations with India, but they really wanted India as well to basically encircle China and then be able to confront them. And then if they have to fight a war with them, then, basically have Taiwan as an unsinkable aircraft carrier, kind of like they look at Israel as, in order to fight a full war with China. I mean, they had troops at the Kinmen Islands under the Biden administration, which is, miles away from a major Chinese city. So that's kind of the way they're looking at this. And I think a lot of those countries surrounding China still look at them as a threat and as kind of like an enemy. but I think they look at the US as more of an ally than China does. And we're going to cover a little bit about what was going on with a plane that crashed, I think it was in the South China Sea, and then also what the Prime Minister of Japan was talking about recently. So let me pull this back up and we will continue on here. Hegseth might well prefer to imagine that valor of American soldiers and warriors can overcome any other disadvantage, including diminished military industrial base and fractured alliances. Instead of boasting about its superior in hand to hand combat, the U.S. should be preparing its military for an onslaught of Chinese drones in a conflict that could last for years. Otherwise, it might win the opening battles, but it will probably lose the long war. So, the other thing I kind of wanted to touch on here in this, let me take this out of here and let me pull this up. And is that where was I going with that? The US is also planning to have like a giant drone swarm against China, which is something that I think it was Kyle Anzalone had written an article at the Libertarian Institute talking about how the US and China both kind of want to have these military drones that are going to fight each other. I mean, it's literally like something that you would picture in like a Terminator movie where you just have all of these little tiny drones going to war and either killing people or killing other machines off the coast of China or something like that. And, and I've brought this up on the show before, and I know it was when Connor was on before, Connor Freeman, um, about how Blake Masters is saying that Chinese troops are going to storm the beaches of California. And anybody who knows anything about the US, we're very, very lucky to be surrounded by two oceans and friendly neighbors to the south and to the north. I mean, like Mexico's not like a strategic ally, but if you told them to pick between China and the US, they're going to pick the US. So we have that going for us. If China really did aspire to be off the coast of California, we would see them from miles and miles away. And what do you think we're going to say? Oh, hey, they're coming over to give us rice cakes. We would blow them out of the water. So the idea that the Chinese are going to storm the beaches of California or something like that is just insane. If they did have the aspiration to blow up some part of the US, they're going to do it via other means. So, continuing on, let's talk about this the helicopter that went down the South China Sea. So I briefly read this story. We're gonna walk through it. Pretty short read. So here we go. Let's talk about it. U.S. Navy Seahawk helicopter FA-18F Super Hornet fighter jet goes down in separate South China Sea incidents. Seahawk helicopter and FA-18 Super Hornet go down during routine operations, all crew rescued. Which, like, I just want people to stop and think about this before I even read this article. What is routine operation in the South China Sea? You will see articles from CNN and all these other, mainstream news outlets saying that China is acting aggressive in the South China Sea. How would the US feel if China was running news articles saying that the US was acting irresponsibly in the Gulf of America? Well, what the fuck is China doing in the Gulf of America? Likewise, what the fuck is the US doing in the South China Sea, in the Taiwan Strait, over there, 7,000 miles away? What are we doing? And as I've covered on the show before, we usually do, the US that is, we'll do these kind of war games or, sail a warship through the Taiwan Strait to the tune of maybe once or twice a month. I honestly don't know how much the Trump administration has done it. I know Biden did it about once or twice a month. So, anyways, two U.S. Navy aircraft from the USS Nimitz, a Seahawk helicopter, and FA-18 Super Hornet fighter jet crashed during separate quote-unquote routine operations over the South China Sea on Sunday, and this is dated October 26th. October 26th. Yeah, I got that right. Cool. Crashed during separate routine operations over the South China Sea on Sunday, with all 5 crew members rescued and in stable condition as the Navy investigates both incidents. The U.S. Pacific Fleet, the Navy's largest operational command, said in a post on X around 2:54 p.m. local time, an MH-60R Seahawk helicopter assigned to the Battle Cats of Helicopter Maritime Strike Squadron 73 crashed in the South China Sea while conducting routine operations from the aircraft carrier USS Nimitz. Search and rescue teams from Carrier Strike Group 11, operating alongside the Nimitz, quickly launched recovery efforts and safely pulled all 3 helicopter crew members from the water. Officials said the personnel were returned for the carrier for medical evaluation and were later confirmed to be in stable condition. Roughly 30 minutes after the helicopter incident, an FA-18 Super Hornet from the Nimitz, assigned to the Fighting Red Cox of Strike Fighter Squadron 22, also went down in the South China Sea during flight operations. Search and rescue teams again responded swiftly, recovering the jet's 2 crew members who had successfully ejected before the aircraft hit the water. Both aviators were transported back to the Nimitz and are reported to be in stable condition. The U.S. Pacific Fleet said in a statement that all 5 service members involved in the crash are safe and accounted for. The cause of both incidents remain under investigation. The Navy has not released additional details about weather conditions, possible mechanical issues, or the nature of the training mission being conducted at the time of the crashes. Which, if I had to guess, and I can't say I would be accurate or would exactly know, my guess they were probably doing the routine spying or just flying off the coast because the U.S. does this quite a bit. So that would be my guess. Once again, I don't know for sure, and they probably won't release a statement on it. While investigators work to determine what led to the 2 mishaps, operations aboard the USS Nimitz have continued as the carrier remains deployed in the Indo-Pacific region. The Nimitz, the Navy's oldest active aircraft carrier, is serving as the centerpiece of the Carrier Strike Group 11, which routinely conducts freedom of navigation and maritime security operations in the South China Sea, waters that have become increasingly contested amid rising tensions between the U.S. and China, which just like, as I said, on the face of it, why are we over there 8,000 miles away? And the answer is because we want Taiwan to become a breakaway province the U.S. can basically use as an unsinkable aircraft carrier to fight a war with China there. So that's what we're doing over there. This is the last part of this article. Hold on. The crashes, the incidents come as the Nimitz undertakes final deployment, capping more than 50 years of service since commissioning in 1975. The carrier was previously involved in Operation Eagle Crew, the failed 1980 mission to rescue American hostages in Tehran. The crashes also coincide with President Trump's visit to Asia. The president spent Sunday night in Malaysia, located along the southern edge of the South China Sea. He's expected to depart for Japan on Monday. So, yeah, weird stuff there. Like I said, I don't think you're going to get a clear picture of exactly what's going on there. I don't think they're going to issue another statement on it. I think that's going to be it, and they're going to kind of keep that under wraps because, I don't think China would like it very much if they found out that we were basically sailing ships right off their coast and crashing in their oceans, which there was there were a couple different incidents where the US and China actually had accidents where people were killed. I want to say there was one in 96 and then one in 2003. I might be wrong on that, but I know there were 2 incidents in the last like 30 years that or that something like that happened with the US and China. And thankfully everything kind of cooled over. Everybody's all right. No escalated tensions, but yeah. So let me pull up this next story. China gives Japan's new Prime Minister Sane Taikichi the cold shoulder. So this is all about the new Prime Minister of Japan. Beijing has yet to congratulate Takichi, who holds controversial positions on Taiwan and Japanese wartime history. Oh, come on. I thought this subscriber login to access the article. All right. So basically, she didn't get we'll just skip this story. But obviously, the US isn't exactly stoked, and China's not exactly stoked about a Japanese prime minister who is giving a lot to the US because, once again, this is right on the edge of China, and this is another area where the US is seeking to build up. Nevsky, good to see you, man. Hope all is well. Thank you so much. Everybody, please make sure you like the stream. If you're watching on Twitter, please retweet, please like. all that good stuff. It would mean a lot to me. And of course, if you like on YouTube, that'd mean a lot to me as well. All that good stuff. Feel free to leave a super chat and I'll address that as it comes up. So, this is a little bit of a positive development here is the US and I'm sorry, not the US, Donald Trump and Xi Jinping when they met on, let me make sure I got this right, October 30th. So that would have been a couple days ago. There's a whole lot to go on here, so I'm not going to read through this entire story because there is a lot, but I'll try to give you the highlights or at least what I see is important. So they have live updates here, which if you're listening, I'm scrolling down through. Trump arrives in Busan, 9:46 a.m. Z flights lands. Z on his way to summit. 9:55 a.m. U.S. nuclear tests to resume, and this was a Truth Social post that Trump had thrown out there about testing nuclear weapons because he had found out that Trump was doing something or that Putin was doing something similar. They were not testing nuclear weapons, but I can't remember what the exact context was, but they were basically doing something routine with their nuclear tests, and Trump decided that he wanted to set off some nukes, essentially. So, U.S. nuclear tests to resume. Referring to China and Russia, Trump announces minutes before the summit he has ordered the U.S. to resume nuclear weapons testing immediately, quote unquote. Close China Russia ties are expected to be on the agenda of the Trump Xi meeting, and strategic stability has also emerged as a prominent issue. Quote, the United States has more nuclear weapons than any other country. This was accomplished, including a complete update and renovation of existing weapons during my first term in office. Because of the tremendous destructive power, I hate to do it, but had no choice. Russia is second, China is a distant third, but we'll be even within 5 years. Trump posted this on his Truth Social platform on Thursday. Because of other countries' testing programs, I've instructed our Department of War to start testing our nuclear weapons on an equal basis. That process will begin immediately. Thank you for your attention to this matter, which I don't know why Trump always says that now. So that's actually not true because my understanding is, and I believe Scott Horton is the man on this, um, Russia does have more nuclear weapons than the US. So talks underway literally a minute after. um, U.S. Chief of Protocol. Live broadcast shows President Xi Jinping entering the meeting venue at Gimhae Airport, shaking hands and exchanging brief remarks with Monica Crowley, the U.S. Chief of Protocol. I wanted to talk about this briefly because I wish I had a clip ready to go, but this is the only time I've ever seen anybody out alpha Trump. Xi had really kind of manhandled Trump, and I've never seen Trump look so nervous around a world leader. Like you could tell there was genuine respect and maybe even a little bit of fear there. Now, am I reading too much into it? It's possible, but just Trump's body language was way off. He didn't seem like he was quite as prepared to really go after Xi, and he just would not stop talking. Like, and I know it's the normal Trump thing to just be bombastic, over the top, say a lot of stuff, and really fluff people up, but this just seemed different. I think I think he realizes Xi might be a little bit better than him, and I mean, let's be honest here. I've talked about this before, and anybody who's watched Tucker Carlson interview Vladimir Putin knows like Xi and Putin are statesmen on a completely other level than Barack Obama, Donald Trump, George Bush, Joe Biden, especially Joe Biden. They know their country's history, and under their role, both China and Russia have really, raised the living standards of their respective countries. As I was mentioning earlier, 50% of people in China under the age of 30 outright own their home. Now, yes, there are problems in like the more rural areas of China, and they still do a lot of like their harvesting by hand. So there's still issues, but honestly, if you look at the standard of living for the average Chinese citizen versus the standard of living for the average American, I would definitely put money on that the average the living standard for the average Chinese person versus the living standard for the average Westerner has definitely increased more so for the Chinese than the average American. So if you watch the videos of Trump and Xi, it's something. So let me get back to this. Xi's first trip to South Korea since 2014. Xi's visit to South Korea and his first in more than a decade. The last one was July 2014. The trip comes at a time when Seoul finds itself increasingly caught in the middle of a deepening US-China rivalry. Trade Minister Yeo Han-koo on Wednesday said South Korea aimed to bolster cooperation with Washington and Beijing to stabilize supply chains with Beijing. And this is kind of what I was talking about. Good to see you again. If you could see, Xi looks like he's just kind of there and he's doing his thing. Trump, I think he knows that's his match or possibly his better. Good to see you again. The live broadcast shows Trump and Xi meeting. Xi tells Trump, "It is a great pleasure to see you again. Good to see you again." Trump says the two leaders shake hands. "Me too," Xi replies. "We're going to have a very successful meeting. I have no doubt, but he's a very tough negotiator, and that's not good," Trump adds, patting Xi on the back. "We know each other well." "We have a great relationship. We've always had a great relationship," Trump says before they walk into the conference room to start the talks. So let's fast forward. Red carpet for Xi. Let's go to 10:16 a.m. Will there be a deal? Trump does not respond to a question on whether Taiwan will be discussed. But when asked whether a deal could be struck or would be struck with Beijing, he says could be that we always have a good relationship. There were earlier concerns, including from Trump aides, the American leader would shift Washington's position on Taiwan to hammer out a sweeping deal with Beijing. So I think they cover this before the very end, but they actually didn't discuss Taiwan, which I think is actually a good thing. I know Trump said that he basically would not go to defend Taiwan, which is a departure from the Biden position, despite what people may think. Biden said multiple times that we would go to war to defend Taiwan. Trump basically said that we'll sell them weapons, but we will not militarily defend them. Now, is that a legitimate statement from Trump or is that Trump being Trump? Probably Trump being Trump, but still that explicit position is better than Biden's position, and that's important. So, anyways, um, fantastic relationship. Opening remarks, Trump describes Xi as a distinguished and respected president. We've already agreed to a lot of things and we'll agree to some more right now. President Xi is a great leader of the country. I think we'll have a fantastic relationship for a long period of time. So Xi says he stands ready to continue working with Trump to build a solid foundation for U.S. China relations and create a sound atmosphere for the development of both countries. On China's side of the table, Xi's entourage includes Kai Zi, the president chief of staff, foreign minister Wang Yi, chairman of the National Development and Reform Commission Zhang Shangji, vice minister of foreign affairs Mao Zazhu, and vice premier He Lifeng and minister of commerce Wang Wentao. So as you can see, there's Xi's side. I don't know all their names that well. And you have Trump, Marco Rubio, Howard Lutnick, and Scott Bessent. They talk about Cambodia and Thailand, which I don't think is really that relevant. Trump's team, as I said earlier. So Xi says frictions are normal, which honestly, he's right. When you have two different superpowers like this, then yeah, you're going to have frictions because I don't know that they're necessarily competing to be the top dog. I don't think China's competing to be the top dog. I think China's focused on China. The US, however, does not want China to be top dog, even if they get there willingly or not. Conrail, looking at the gold prices right now, which is a good indicator of the state of economics, the market seems to be a little at ease for the time as a result of the Trump-Xi summit. Yeah, that seems to be the case. I haven't looked at gold prices that much, but I do think that Trump, he's a wild card in some respects. I definitely thought he would be a lot more hawkish towards China this time around, especially considering that he has like Marco Rubio in his ear, Elbridge Colby, Pete Hegseth, and all these guys who are just insane China hawks. But Trump seems to be the most dovish out of everybody, which is a blessing. But you know, Trump is wherever the last person he talked to is. Xi says frictions are normal. Xi notes that he has had many exchanges with Trump, and they have been in close contact since the U.S. president's re-election. Under a joint guidance, China-U.S. relations have remained stable on the whole, he says. It's normal for the two leading economies of the world to have frictions now and then, Xi says, adding that in the face of challenges, the two leaders should stay on the right course. I always believe China's development goes hand in hand with your vision to make America great again, which I love this. Xi continues that China and the United States should be partners and friends. This is what history has taught us, and that's what reality demands. And Xi's right. He's absolutely right. At the end of his opening remarks, Xi tells Trump, I look forward to exchanging views with you on questions important for our two countries and the world. Xi says China and the US can work together to accomplish more great and concrete things for the good of the two nations and the whole world. And he's right. He's absolutely right. And that's the way it has to be. The US and China cannot fight a war. That's how you end humanity. That sounds hyperbolic, but two nuclear armed superpowers going to war, it just can't happen. A day at the Trump Xi summit, and this is China's change of plan. Chinese state news agency Xinhua um, published a story behind the drafting of the nation's next 5-year plan to 2030, which is kind of what China does. They plan more long term, where the US plans basically within the current presidential administration. It said Beijing had discussed countermeasures for the changed and external situation and adjusted the plan in April, days after Trump imposed reciprocal tariffs. According to the report, Xi had emphasized we need to clearly understand the broader environment when planning economic and social development. The report also noted that since the beginning of this year, the adverse impact of the change in the international situation had worsened, while external suppression and containment have continually escalated. Social media moments, basically just a photo op. And before I get into the fentanyl thing, let me run an ad real quick and I will be right back with everybody. All right, we're going to take a second today to chill and tell you about the show's sponsors, Tiger Fitness. Make sure you go to the link below to get all the supplements that I use day in, day out, and beyond. As I always say, you do not need supplements to become all jacked and tan or to progress in your health journey, but they could definitely be a useful tool in that respect. So as you can see on tigerfitness.com, we got MTS Nutrition, Blackstone Labs, Ambrosia, HPN, Nutrix Research, America Labs, Alani New, Pump Chasers, there's Redcon One, Accent Sledge, plenty of different companies that pretty much have absolutely any supplement you could possibly think of. Pre-workouts, fat burners, BCAAs, electrolyte mixes, you name it, it's on there. So go to Tiger Fitness through the link below. Use code Kyle at checkout to let them know that I sent you. Get your protein powder, you name it, anything that's going to help you stick to your diet and hopefully achieve your health goals. All right, thanks. Back to the show. Whew. I ran all the way downstairs and got myself a drink because doing all this talking does dehydrate you a little bit. Okay, so I have a theory that Trump is possibly being nervous around Xi. Might be that he's looking for a possible off ramp due to the fact his tariff policies aren't working. I could be wrong, but you never know. I think that's a good theory, and I think you're right because every single time they've gone to impose these tariffs, Conrail, Trump has backed off. And as I was saying earlier, I know it's funny. What the hell's his name? Chuck Schumer calls Trump Taco Trump. He's right. Trump always chickens out. Every single time he says he's going to do something, he backs off, chickens out. It's a funny name, but it's true. So, where are we here? The fentanyl factor, which I'll explain this here in a minute, but Trump expects to lower tariffs on China in exchange for cooperation on tightening export controls on fentanyl precursors, the chemicals used to make the synthetic opioid blamed for hundreds of thousands of drug overdose deaths. The U.S. could cut its 20% fentanyl-related tariff on Chinese goods by as much as 10 percentage points, according to the Wall Street Journal. Quote, I expect to be lowering that because I believe that they're going to help us with the fentanyl situation, Trump told reporters on a flight from Tokyo to Gwangju, South Korea on Wednesday. And according to the newspaper, they're going to be doing what they can do. The fentanyl issue has long strained U.S.-China relations. Trump sanctioned China over the issue during his first term. In response, China imposed strict controls on the drug production and export, placing all fentanyl-related substances under a regulatory schedule. So, okay, TikTok watch. Let me pull up this story. I've talked about it before on the show, but the U.S. made fentanyl trafficking illegal in 2019, which was under Trump's first term. I have always maintained the position that unfortunately fentanyl is still up to the discretion of the person using it. To be clear, if you are a drug dealer and you're selling drugs laced with fentanyl, unbeknownst to the person consuming it, you deserve to have life in prison or dance on air. No ambiguity about that. But if you're knowingly taking fentanyl, you're kind of putting your life in your own hands. The other thing about this is we should also consider the factors that are making people want to take fentanyl. It's absolutely devastating, and one death from fentanyl is too many. But to blame this all on a foreign government that has made it illegal now 6 years ago at this point, seems a little ill-placed. I think we need to look inwards and realize that our country does have a lot of issues that are going unsolved right now, and it's very, very tragic, and we need to figure out a way how to solve that for people or, get the government out of the way in a way that allows people to form better communities more freely and coexist in a way that makes their lives better. There's just so much more to do than just blaming China for the fentanyl problem because they may be a part of it, but they're not the only part of it. And it seems like that's all we ever hear about is just, oh, this country's bad. So, and the net result of that is, oh, well, we should go pick on big old scary China because they're killing everybody with fentanyl, which just isn't true. Let me get this back up and we will resume. TikTok watch. Another key issue to watch. Sorry. Another key issue to watch at the summit is the fate of TikTok. Trump and Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent both recently said the two leaders could consummate a final deal that would keep TikTok operating in the U.S. as early as Thursday. In September, Trump signed an executive order paving the way for the US based ownership structure with a majority of American investors reverting a ban, although Beijing has yet to publicly endorse it. Sorry. The years long standoff dating back to Trump's first term stems from Washington's view of the Chinese owned video platform as a propaganda tool and privacy threat. Beijing has long condemned the forced sale um, push, once calling it robber's logic in response to TikTok's success. Which, if I'm being honest here, um, it's just they're not really concerned about TikTok itself because the US government has all that data and all the private data stored from TikTok is stored on Oracle servers, which Larry Ellison, hello. And now he owns all these news companies. That Palantir has your data too. So um, they're really not concerned about your data. I'm sorry. That's just the lie they're using to gin up more fucking war attention. Anyways, more from the meeting or 10:58 a.m. Interest in rare earths outcome. Beijing added 5 more medium to heavy rare earth elements to its export controls list this month, along with equipment and technologies related to minerals extractions and processing. But then the implementation of these curbs could be eased after Trump and Xi meet. As hinted by Scott Bessent, Beijing holds a near monopoly on the supply and processing of rare earths, heightening interest around the world in Thursday's talks. The U.S. has ramped up efforts to hedge against rare earth export controls by China. Days ahead of the meeting, Trump signed a flurry of deals with countries such as Malaysia and Thailand to secure mineral supplies. So, one thing that I heard Carl Jha talk about that I think is relevant here and now as we're talking about rare earths is that they hold a monopoly on where is it? I want to make sure I highlight this. Um, where is it? Beijing holds a near monopoly on the supply and processing of rare earths, not just the supply, but the processing. So if China has a monopoly on that, then you can't really just because you have the materials doesn't mean you can do anything with them. So that's another little sticking point here. So, anyways, soybean farmers seek relief. We're going to talk about this a little bit. I know I've probably talked about it before at some point, but China imports, I think it's $9 billion worth of food from the US per year. Actually, you know what? Here, I will actually Google that while we're right here. I know I looked at it on Statista. Statista, China imports US food. Export value, imports to China statistics. In fact, this is okay. That's AI overview. Septol. I'm trying to find imports of goods. I'm trying to find import services. Imports. Okay, import value of agricultural products from China to 2025 to 2024. Oh, they're probably gonna make me fucking download this. All right. Let me go back to the AI overview because you hold on. Sorry. How much food does China import from the US? Okay, so the AI overview, which it's never perfect, but it does sometimes. It'll at least give you some information at this stage. Sorry, let me. China imported $36.4 billion worth of US agricultural products in fiscal year 2022. The most recent complete fiscal year for which data is available, soybeans, corn, and meat products are among the major food imported, although volumes and total values can fluctuate due to trade tensions, competition, and global prices. Top US food exports to China: soybeans, consistently the largest agricultural import from the US, corn, meats and dairy, and other products. So, when people talk about the whole China buying the US or all the farmland in the US, hold on, let me move this out of the way real quick. When people start talking about China owning all the farmland in the US, the one thing that they don't understand is that actually China bought a company called Smithfield, which is a large pork company in the US back in 2014, I think it was. And that actually doubled their holding of US farmland. I might not have this perfect. I know I did a podcast on this under one of my debunking propaganda series about US or China owning farmland in the US. Um, when they bought Smithfield, that drastically increased their farmland holdings from I think it was like 70,000 acres to like 140,000 acres, which still they don't even have like a fraction of 1% of all US farmland. Like it is ridiculously minuscule how much farmland that China owns in the United States. But that being said, part of the reason why they get that $36.4 billion worth of food and agricultural products from the US alone is because a lot of China is deserts. So when people start talking about this whole fighting the war with China deal, they get $36 billion worth of food from the US. If we really wanted to, they have a decent diabetic population due to malnutrition because of some of the more rural areas in China. If we really wanted to, blockade them, quit giving them food like that. People are generally okay until they start going hungry. My daughter and my wife are downstairs right now. If you were to tell me that you're going to starve them, I would do unimaginable things to make sure that that didn't happen. My wife and I were having a conversation yesterday about the things we would do to somebody if harm ever came to our daughter. So like people are generally okay until they start getting hungry or until they're in life altering conditions. And if you would want to essentially cut China off or really hurt them, tell them we're not giving you food anymore. That would probably do something. Anyways, soybean farmers seek relief. China relies heavily on imported soybeans for its livestock industry, and amid ongoing trade tensions with the US, it has turned to Brazil and Argentina to supply them. Last month, the world's largest food buyer bought 12.8 million tons of soybeans, with a notable increase from Argentina while importing none from the US. The outcome of Trump's talks with Xi, including on the issue of soybeans, could weigh heavily on the 2026 US midterm elections. US farmers, many of whom which backed the America First president for his deal-making reputation, argue he is out of touch with their struggles. As their economic pain deepens, they are increasingly urging partnership with China. They talk about the airbase. They're meeting at the airbase. Not really all that important. Soybean purchases resume. China has resumed, and this is 11:20 a.m. China has resumed some purchases of the U.S. soybeans ahead of the Xi-Trump meeting in South Korea. Scott Gaffner, a board member of the Illinois Soybean Association, confirmed the latest development to the Post, saying he had just learned that a couple of shipments of soybeans were delivered to China. The soybean shipments are China's first purchases from America's autumn harvest. The development comes as U.S. farmers have urged Trump to take a conciliatory approach to his talks with Xi to reach a lasting soybean deal. A research note from HSBC on Wednesday said that an increase in Chinese purchases of U.S. soybeans and agricultural products was likely to be on summit agenda. It said while the U.S. supplied 23% of China's total soybean imports, sorry, it said that while the U.S. supplied 23% of China's total soybean imports last year, its share had dwindled to less than 5% in recent months. Ahead of Thursday's meeting, U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said that talks result in a resounding victory for American farmers. Trump in Asia showing what successful American leadership looks like. He said in a social media post that included a photo of the U.S. president speaking at the APEC summit in South Korea. So another actually good development here, which is just not my, it's not my usual thing to be optimistic about U.S.-China relations. So when I see them going in the right direction, specifically under Trump, um, I'm enheartened. It's a good thing. Travi, yeah, anything to pull gold back from that 4,000 selling is good, but it's a long way to go to ease inflation overall. Yeah, exactly. I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not the stockbroker guy, but Beyond Meat is interesting. I'll say that much. And I know everybody saw like the memes about it and the short squeeze, but there may or may not be some more stuff going on there. I don't know for sure, but I would be interested to see kind of what happens there. So just a little tip. Let me pull this back up. U.S. urged to stabilize rivalry. Washington could help stabilize relations with Beijing over the issues of Taiwan and the South China Sea, according to the U.S. think tank, the RAND Corporation, which is a big sponsor of all these papers. And a lot of like the China hawks kind of get their information from the RAND Corporation. In a report released this month, RAND identifies Taiwan as one of the most dangerous potential flashpoints, but urges Washington to create a situation giving Beijing incentives to adopt a gradual approach to reunification, which is funny because they've been the ones sponsoring a lot of the papers once again to kind of fight a war with China. As for the disputed South China Sea, the report suggests a credible but conditional willingness to scale back U.S. military activities could be valuable if followed by Chinese restraint, which once again, why is the US in the position to tell people whether they should be restrained in their own backyard or not? Like, come on. Rand said Washington should prevent the tension from reaching the extreme dangerous levels and that recent comments by China's leaders were not as extreme as portrayed. Which, shocking, China does not want to fight a war with the US, but the US wants to fight a war with China. Boeing and trade crossfire. Basically, China doesn't want to buy any more Boeings because they keep falling out of the sky. Attention to the Ukraine war. Trump campaigned on ending the war in Ukraine, and it's funny because obviously Russia is a big partner of China. China has wanted to end the war in Ukraine because why? They want the Ukrainian grain. They want food because their country is not exactly the best country for farming. So it's in their interest to have the war in Russia and Ukraine to end. But once again, Russia's an ally and Ukraine isn't necessarily an enemy, but they're not an ally. So they're going to be more differential towards their ally, Russia. So let me continue on here. Attention to Ukraine war. Officials in Europe will be closely watching the Xi-Trump summit for mention of the Ukraine war. Trump has said he would like China's help to deal with Russia as he seeks to end the war. Which Trump's just, let's be honest here, Trump's not doing a good job at doing this because he's continued to fund it. And now he's saying that he believes that Ukraine could take back territory after saying in private that he knows that Ukraine can't win. Trump has said he would like China's help to deal with Russia as he seeks to end the war. Last week, Xi Jinping said he can have a big influence on Russian President Vladimir Putin. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky this week also called on Trump to pressure China to reduce support for Russia, which invaded Ukraine in February 2022. Beijing has positioned itself as a peacemaker that sees both Moscow and Kiev as partners, but has maintained close economic ties with Russia during the 3-year conflict. Europe has long accused China of supplying dual-use items to Russia, a charge Beijing denies. Trump's view of Taiwan, they keep this pretty short. In his second presidential term, Trump has vacillated regarding Taiwan as he seeks to settle a trade deal with Beijing. Beijing has repeatedly said that Taiwan was the first red line that cannot be crossed and has urged Washington to cease arms sales to Taiwan to post Taiwanese independence. Trump told reporters last week that Beijing would not attempt to seize Taiwan. I think we'll be just fine with China. China doesn't want to do that. Now, that doesn't mean it's not the apple of his eye, because it is, but I don't see anything happening, he said, referring to Xi. So I think Trump actually has his finger on the pulse pretty good with this one, because I don't think that China seeks to invade Taiwan. I see Chase Geyser, who's been on the show before. He's always saying, "Oh my God, China's going to take Taiwan." If you look at his timeline and look up Taiwan, he's predicted multiple times now that China would take Taiwan, and they never do. Because as Professor Ken Hammond said on the show, which I had him on a year or two back, and he described it as they essentially want to muddle along. They just kind of want to do what they're going to do and eventually figure it out sometime down the line. Time is on China's side. The US is racking up debt rapidly, and so is China, but China's been around for 5,000 years. The US has been around for about 250. Taiwan is an aspiring breakaway province, although largely it's a heavily debated issue, but it's just going to be, it's essentially globally recognized as their territory. We can say Taiwan's a country all we want, but the fact of the matter is, if China decides that Taiwan's not a country and it's a territory of China, it's a territory of China. As far as I'm concerned, it's a territory of China. As far as the US is even concerned, our official policy is that we recognize it as a territory of China. So Trump's position on this is actually good. Downplays the threat of Taiwan. Shadow of the South China Sea. The South China Sea has been a fundamental stress point in the U.S.-China relations in recent years. Beijing repeatedly accused Washington of being an extra-regional agitator that undermines stability in the waters where China's long-running territorial dispute with the Philippines, a U.S. treaty ally, has resulted in a frequent clash between coast guards. The U.S. holds joint military exercises with the Philippines and other regional partners in the waterway and sends warships in the disputed waters for what it calls freedom of navigation operations. At the weekend, a U.S. Navy fighter jet, which I covered in a story earlier, and helicopter crashed in the South China Sea, prompting Beijing to respond on Monday that Washington's frequent deployment of warships and aircraft in the region was the cause of maritime security risks and a threat to regional peace and stability. Pretty reasonable statement, if you ask me. Experts split on prospects. According to the Post's previous analysis, some of the observers remain skeptical there will be any breakthroughs, but see potential for gradual steps towards mutual de-escalation of U.S.-China tensions, which I think we kind of see in this. Summit ends, meeting shorter than other summits. Basically, some stuff where it ends, so we'll kind of skip through some of this. Trump tells reporters on Air Force One, this is 12:55 p.m., tells reporters on Air Force One that Washington will say more later on NVIDIA chip exports. Trump says he discussed with Xi sell NVIDIA chips to China and that is up to Beijing to continue talks with the company. But he clarifies that Thursday's discussion did not address the sale of NVIDIA's latest Blackwell chips to China. So this is this just kind of epitomizes Trump. Trump wants to see denuclearization. Aboard Air Force One, Trump tells reporters that he wants to see denuclearization and that Washington is talking to Moscow about the issue and will talk to Beijing soon. Trump dismisses concerns that the world is entering a more risky nuclear phase. As he points out, Russia holds the largest number of confirmed nuclear weapons, followed by the United States, then China, which is funny because he literally said in this article earlier in a Truth Social post that China or the U.S. has the most nuclear weapons. Quote, denuclearization will be a tremendous thing. And I agree with Trump on this. Trump says it is something we're talking to Russia and China will be added to that if we do something. So, yeah, he says one thing and then does another, does something and then says another. It's so hard to keep up with Trump on this stuff because he's just all over the board all the time. He literally takes every side of every issue. We have a deal. Trump says a tremendous amount of American soybeans and other farm products will be purchased by China starting immediately. Asked how soon he'll have a trade deal with Beijing, Trump says it'll be signed pretty soon and there will not be any major stumbling blocks. We have a deal, he tells reporters during his flight to Washington, adding that it will be negotiated annually at the year's end. Amazing meeting visits planned, fentanyl tariff cut. So they cut tariffs over fentanyl. According to Trump, the two leaders agreed that China would work very hard on the fentanyl issue, despite it being complex. He says 20% fentanyl-related tariffs on Chinese go to be reduced to 10%, effective immediately. Rare earths. Trump also claims that the roadblock of China's rare earths controls is gone now. Hopefully, it'll be disappeared from our vocabulary for a little while. Tells reporters. He says a 1-year agreement for Beijing to pause controls on rare earths will be extended after a year. Shipbuilding probe. He did not have a meeting with Kim Jong Un, which is upsetting. Regarding the meeting with North Korean leader Kim Jong Un, Trump says we were never able to talk. I was so busy. I think it would have been maybe disrespectful to the importance of the meeting if we did that. Trump says so. I'd come back with respect to Kim Jong Un, which friend of the show, Joe Terwilliger, was his envoy, which is just awesome. Trump says that China's going to invest in the U.S., which might just be another Trump thing. TikTok deal wasn't mentioned. We'll go to Xi's comment here. China's growth good for cooperation, says Xi. Xi says China's economic growth could create more room for China-U.S. cooperation. Xinhua reports, we have never sought to challenge or replace anyone, Xi said, according to Xinhua. Instead, we have focused on managing our own affairs well and sharing development opportunities with countries around the world. This has been key to China's success. Xi was also quoted saying that China and the U.S. should maintain a positive interactions on regional and international issues and join hand in hand to do more to benefit both their countries and the world. He urged China and the U.S. to support each other next year when China will host APEC and the U.S. hosts the G20. So China addressed TikTok deal. Let's make sure we touch on this. They'll address the TikTok deal with the U.S. in an appropriate manner. The Chinese Commerce Ministry says in a statement released on trade talks with Kuala Lumpur, consists on tariffs. So that's pretty much that from all of the Trump-Xi summit, which I know that's a lot. We still have more stories to cover, so don't go anywhere. Hopefully everybody's doing well. Please make sure you like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. If you're listening on Twitter, please like it, retweet it. Helps the show get out there. I would greatly, greatly appreciate it. So one thing I wanted to cover before I move on to the Ukraine and Israel stuff, and then we'll wrap up the show here. Let me get my screen back up. I literally removed that off stage because I'm an idiot. Where is it? Okay, so this is kind of a big deal. Not good at all. After giving you good news about China, report Trump has decided to bomb military targets inside Venezuela. So to be clear, this has not happened yet. According to the Miami Herald, President Donald Trump has made the decision to strike military targets inside Venezuela, and the war could begin at any minute. Congress has not given any authority to the White House to wage war against Venezuela. On Friday, the Herald reported speaking with sources who explained the strikes would target leadership of the Cartel de los Solos. The White House claims Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro is the leader of the cartel, an assertion that is disputed by U.S. intelligence and other reports. Maduro is about to find himself trapped and might soon discover that he cannot flee the country even if he decides to, the source told the outlet. What's worse for him, there is now more than one general willing to capture and hand him over, fully aware that the one thing is to talk about death and another to see it coming. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who has led the charge inside the White House for regime change in Venezuela, claimed the Miami Herald was duped by fake information. Your sources claiming to have knowledge of the situation tricked you into writing a fake story, he wrote on X, which Marco Rubio is a known liar and an anchor baby. The report follows U.S. targeting 10 vessels in the Caribbean, and that the Department of War claims were engaged in trafficking drugs to the U.S. Dozens have been killed in strikes, and the Ecuadorian government has freed survivors that after it determined they were not engaged in wrongdoing. Trump administration officials and other top Republicans have repeatedly threatened regime change in Caracas. Congress has not declared war or otherwise given the White House any approval to conduct war against drug traffickers or against Venezuela. The U.S. is engaged in massive military buildup in the Caribbean and has conducted mock bomb runs with B-52 flying up to Venezuelan territory. A few congressmen have said Trump's war on drug cartels is illegal. Senator Rand Paul has condemned the strikes on alleged drug boats as extrajudicial killings from our dear friend Kyle Anzalone. So I'm hoping that this doesn't become a war, because we don't want that. We do not want war in our hemisphere. And let's be honest here. This isn't about drugs, because even the Drug Enforcement Administration's own data says that the vast majority of drugs don't come from Venezuela. It's about fighting back against China, and it's about oil, and it's about, a socialist dictator and Marco Rubio's pet project. That's what it's about. Anyways, story from Dave DeCamp. Let me pull this up the whole way. Zelensky says Ukraine is working to expand long range strikes inside Russia. Dated October 27th, a few days ago, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said on Monday that Ukraine was not, was working to expand long range attacks inside Russia with a focus on targeting oil refineries. Zelensky said he held a meeting with arms manufacturers that produce long range weapons. We reviewed the effectiveness of our long range strikes over a defined period and the results achieved, he wrote on X. Russian oil refining is already paying a tangible price for the war and will pay even more. We set tasks to expand geography for the use of our long range capabilities, the Ukrainian leader added. So far, the U.S. has denied Zelensky's request for Tomahawk missiles, which are nuclear capable and have a range of over 1,000 miles. But according to media reports, the U.S. has been helping Ukraine with strikes deep inside Russia, including its drone attacks on Russian energy infrastructure. Earlier this month, the Financial Times reported that the U.S. has been providing intelligence for the drone attacks, and that one source told the paper that Ukraine's drone force's instrument the U.S. is using to achieve the goal of undermining Russian economy and pushing Russian Vladimir Putin toward a settlement and to end the war. The U.S. has also imposed new sanctions on Russian oil companies. President Trump has recently denied a report that said the U.S. approved Ukrainian missile strikes inside Russia, but Ukraine's military recently claimed that it used British-provided Storm Shadow missiles, which require U.S. targeting data, in a strike on a Russian chemical plant. While vying to expand attacks inside Russia, Ukraine continues to lose territory in the battle in the eastern Ukraine, where Russian forces have recently entered the city of Pokrovsk in the Donetsk Oblast. Russia's demands for a peace deal include Ukraine ceding Donetsk and the Silver Territory that controls in Luhansk, an offer President Trump has reportedly told Zelensky to accept. Which, unfortunately, in a war like this, he has no other choice. What are you going to do? Keep fighting? All you're doing is killing, the most noble and, strong Russian and Ukrainian soldiers, which Russia's not really losing nearly as much. I know they said 1 million Russians have died, but I don't think anybody really knows. I remember asking Kyle about this, and this was a while ago, but nobody really seems clear on these numbers. And I think Trump is playing it up publicly because now he owns the war, and Trump is now complicit in the war in Ukraine. I don't think he wants to be, so I think he's trying to save face in this respect. And I think the only way that he can do that is to basically continue to bluff and say that, Ukraine's doing fine. Anyways, we're going to get to the other half of the show, that Israel resumes the genocide. So they're saying that it's that they didn't violate the ceasefire, but I don't know. If you kill 100 people, then I think that is considered breaking a ceasefire. Netanyahu orders immediate and powerful attacks on Gaza, over 100 killed. Airstrikes overnight across the Palestinian territory. Both these stories are by our dear friend Dave DeCamp. Airstrikes overnight across the Palestinian territory killed 104 people, including 46 children, according to local health officials. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has ordered the Israeli military to immediately carry out forceful strikes in the Gaza Strip, his office said in a statement, signaling the Gaza ceasefire deal is about to collapse. Israel is claiming that its forces in Rafah came under attack by a Hamas fighter, and Palestinians on the ground reported hearing gunfire and strikes in the south, but Hamas has said that it had no relation to the shooting incident in Rafah and reaffirms its commitment to the ceasefire agreement. So, as other people have theorized, and I think I would agree with their theory, is that it could be just essentially not remnants, but just lone actors going out and then causing havoc, and now them just blaming it on Hamas. Because if you ask Yoav Gallant or some of the other hawks in the Knesset, everybody's Hamas. That those 46 children they killed, they're Hamas. So yeah, of course they got to die. What are you, some kind of anti-Semite? Israel currently controls about 58% of Gaza's territory, and Netanyahu has reportedly decided to take over more territory. After Netanyahu's announcement, a series of airstrikes were reported in Gaza City and Khan Yunis. According to Al Jazeera, witnesses said a massive strike hit near Al Shifa Hospital. At least 100 people have been killed, and pictures and videos show that at least 46 children are among the dead and wounded, which is just brutal. Netanyahu's statement also came after Israel accused Hamas of violating the ceasefire deal over claims that it was delaying and staging the recovery of the bodies of deceased Israeli hostages. Before the agreement was signed, Israeli officials acknowledged that the bodies would take time to find, and CNN cited officials who said some remains may never be found. And I think even JD Vance, when he was in Israel, had said that, yeah, it's going to take some time. When you completely destroy an area like Gaza, where I think it's like 90% of Gaza is just like eliminated, destroyed, then yeah, to find hostages and bodies, it's going to take some time. It's not like you're just going to be able to find them walking down the street because there's not really streets to walk down anymore. Israel released a video on Tuesday, said it showed Hamas burying a body, then bringing it in the Red Cross to recover it. But according to the Israeli media, the U.S. didn't buy Israel's claim that the footage showed that Hamas violated the ceasefire and objected to Israel launching airstrikes. Then the alleged attack took place in Rafah, and Netanyahu renewed airstrikes. Israel has also impeded efforts to recover more bodies by refusing to allow Turkish and Qatari teams to enter the Strip and help locate and retrieve remains, according to two Arab officials speaking to the Times of Israel. The initiative would have also involved representatives from Israel and the US and Egypt aiding in the effort. So I want to stop here and also kind of elaborate that I think part of the reason why they don't want those officials there is because they would see not only how bad everything is, but also it would be quite an incident if you drop bombs on Qatari officials or what other country was it? Qatari and Turkish. If you had Turkish and Qatari officials getting killed by Israeli bombs, might be a little bit of an incident. I know that Trump made Netanyahu apologize to Qatar, but I refuse to believe that Trump wasn't well aware in advance that Israel was going to bomb Qatar in that situation because they don't do anything without the US's knowledge and honestly, I think approval. In response to Netanyahu's announcement, Hamas has said that it postponed the planned handover of another body due to Israeli violations. Hamas's military wing, the Al Qassam Brigade, said any Israeli escalations will hinder search, digging, and retrieval operations of the bodies, which will lead to a delay in recovering the bodies. Later in the day, Hamas said that it found two more Israeli bodies during excavations in Gaza City. Well, there's been a de-escalation in Gaza. Israeli forces have continued launching air attacks since the ceasefire deal was signed on October 10th, killing more than 100 Palestinians in that time. Israel is not allowed the agreed upon number of aid trucks to enter Gaza. Comments from President Trump have also made it clear that Israeli officials are eager to restart the full-scale genocidal campaign and would do so if he gave the word. Despite Netanyahu's announcement, a U.S. official told Al Jazeera that the ceasefire is still holding and the U.S. Intends to continue to work to implement President Trump's peace plan, which I don't really consider it a peace plan. I know Katie Halper had said something about this. I forget who she quoted, but an Israeli ceasefire basically means that the opposing side ceases and then the Israelis fire. It seems pretty accurate because that's exactly what happened here. Anyways, Vice President JD Vance later insisted that the ceasefire was holding despite renewed Israeli strikes. The ceasefire is holding. That doesn't mean that there aren't going to be little skirmishes, which I guess a little skirmish means 100 dead people, 46 dead children. I guess it's just little skirmish. We know that Hamas or somebody else within Gaza attacked an IDF soldier. We expect the Israelis are going to respond, but I think the president's peace is going to hold. JD Vance is much more optimistic than me, and I think that's because that's his running mate that is now in charge of watching over the ceasefire that is now breaking apart. Unfortunate, but that is what it is. So, final story of the day here, and then we'll talk a little bit about. I want to get a little health clip in here as well. A final story of the day is, let me pull this up from our dear friend Kyle Anzalone at the Libertarian Institute. Israel encouraged Qatar to send money to Hamas, knowing it would fund Hamas, or send money to Gaza, knowing it would fund Hamas. So he made a AI generated image of Netanyahu handing money over to some Qataris. A newly released memo from the Israeli government shows that Tel Aviv pressed Qatar to send money to Gaza, knowing the funds would benefit Hamas. The document adds the pile of evidence that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu propped up Hamas for years before the October 7th, 2023 attack. Con News journalist Solomon, I'm not even going to try to say his last name, reported obtaining a 2020 memo that pushed Qatar to continue sending financial support to Gaza, knowing some of the funds would reach Hamas. Israel's begging documents to Qatar, requesting to continue transferring money to the Gaza Strip, even though there were indications that part of it was leaking to Hamas. he wrote on X. The Qataris, in return for the money, sent actual invoices to Israel. In short, everything is documented. Left-wing Democratic leader Yair Golan said the report proved Netanyahu was an asset of Hamas. That's pretty funny, just saying that out loud. Tonight it became clear that he groveled and begged Qataris to continue transferring cash to Gaza despite knowing that the money was going directly to Hamas military wing, Golan argued on X. With this Qatari money, Hamas strengthened, trained, built tunnels, and carried out the October 7th massacre. He continued, Netanyahu was and remains an asset of Hamas and a dangerous partner of its primary sponsor, Qatar. Maz Wadaz, I think that's how you say his name, disclosure adds to evidence that Netanyahu propped up Hamas control of Gaza for years. Netanyahu told Likud Party's Knesset members in March 2019, anyone who wants to thwart the establishment of a Palestinian state has to support bolstering Hamas and transferring money to Hamas. That's part of our strategy to isolate the Palestinians in Gaza from the Palestinians in the West Bank. It's impossible to reach an agreement with them. Everyone knows this, but we control the height of the flames. Likud spokesman Jonathan Urich, one of Netanyahu's media advisors, bragged that one of Netanyahu's key successes was disconnecting Gaza from the West Bank. Netanyahu basically smashed the vision of the Palestinian state in these two places. Some of the achievement is related to the Qatari money reaching Hamas each month. Former Avigdor Lieberman previously said that Prime Minister dispatched high officials such as Mossad chief Yossi Cohen to Doha, begging Qataris to keep the funneling money to Hamas. Top Israeli officials and their apologists in the U.S. have argued that the indiscriminate bombing of Gaza is justified because the Palestinians elected Hamas. However, Tel Aviv has not allowed elections in the Strip since 2006 and has helped keep Hamas in power. That is all the foreign policy news I have for today. So I know, guys, please let me know in the comments if you like the way that I do these shows, because like I said, I'm probably just going to be doing a full foreign policy rundown report every week if I have a guest, whether they're here or not, or if it's just me. I kind of like doing it this way because it frees up the rest of my week. And of course, if you like just a little bit more of a laid back, a little bit more easily digestible show, I do 5 till midnight still every Monday night at 8 p.m. Eastern time. And we have tons of Patreon members there. And we're going to start kind of building up that community over there. So please make sure you go check that out. I'd really appreciate it. Conrail, thank you so much for the 1999 super chat. Choosing between X and reading articles like on Anti-War and the Libertarian Institute and Mises Institute, I'd rather read articles and slop accounts like Megatron Ron, Lord Bebo, and even some of the good ones like DD Geopolitics. Yeah, I completely agree. And hopefully the way I'm doing the show now is a little bit more of just straightforward news, no BS, no slop. Kyle, all the people that I'm going to mention, but Kyle Anslow and Dave DeCamp, Connor Freeman, Scott Horton, all those guys are just excellent accounts, excellent follows. DD Geopolitics is pretty good too. They run sometimes a little bit goofy stuff, but overall, I think they're a good account. And Sarah's awesome. She's been on the show before. So yeah. Now I did see a thing, and it may take me a minute to pull it up. So let me run one more ad real quick, and then we'll kind of wrap up the show. Let me do this one. All right, guys, we are going to take a quick break from the show to tell you about the show's sponsor. We are now brought to you by Fox & Sons Coffees. You can see right here, I got the Den Blend Dark. Really enjoy that. I've been drinking a lot of their Brazil Honey Prep. Right here, as you can hear, there's not a lot of beans left in it because I've been drinking it quite a bit. Just tell you a little bit about Fox & Sons, why I support them and why you should too, is that Stephen had started the company up in Michigan to help teach his son about entrepreneurship. I'm all about that, and I do firmly believe that in order to spread liberty in our lifetimes, we have to support those who support similar values as us. And Stephen does support all the same libertarian values that I bring and talk about on the show a lot. So go to foxandsons.com, use code Kyle at checkout to get 15% off of orders $25 or more, and there's always free shipping whenever you place an order that is more than $37.99. Find their coffee absolutely fantastic, and I'm sure you will too. So one more time, go to foxandsons.com, use code Kyle at checkout to get yourself a little discount. Let them know I sent you, and support the coffee that supports you. All right, guys, thanks. Back to the show. All right, let me pull this up here from AOL.com. This will be the last story for the day, and then I'll let all you guys go. One more time, please make sure if you're watching on Twitter, retweet, like the stream, all that good stuff. Follow me everywhere, and let's wrap this up here. So For our health story of the day, RFK is recommending saturated fats, which, you know, I used to be a big fan of saturated fats and saying that they're good for you and seed oils are bad for you, but I've done enough podcasts and talked about it enough that I think everybody knows where I stand on this now. So, from AOL.com, what to know about saturated fat as RFK touts whole milk and beef tallow. So, beef tallow has really become kind of a grift, if I'm being honest. Everybody has beef tallow something now, and it's this the greatest thing in the world. But is it? Let's talk about it. Changes may be coming to the U.S. dietary guidelines. If public comments from Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. are any indication, Americans could see a big difference when it comes to saturated fat. In July, Kennedy said at a meeting the National Governors Association that new guidelines would be common sense and stress the need to eat saturated fats, dairy, good meat, and fresh meat and vegetables. He has also called guidelines to promote low fat dairy over full fat versions antiquated. He also praised fast food chains that have switched their fries from vegetable oil to beef tallow. Beef tallow is 50% saturated fat. Okay, so first things first, go back and listen to my seed oils podcast because that one I kind of dive into the information on seed oils, and also listen to my show with Alan Flanagan where we discuss saturated fats and kind of their detrimental effects. So I want to approach this in a fair way, and if you're going to increase saturated fats in your diet, which according to all data and my understanding of the data, you want to keep saturated fats in your diet to less than 12% of overall calories per day, um, which really isn't, or I'm sorry, 12% of your overall fats. Really not that difficult to do. If you're going to get a significant amount of saturated fat, though, it is wise to eat fiber with that meal as well. Another health tip is just increasing fiber overall, because not only will it help keep you fuller for longer, but also it's going to help keep you more satiated. Well, satiated, but also help control and stabilize blood sugar levels, and also help reduce some of the negative effects that excess saturated fat could have on you. So, just a little tip there if you're going to be having lots of saturated fat, get some greens, get some good vegetables in there, get some fruits, which to RFK's credit, he does say to do in here. Uh, Saturated fats are known to raise the risk of heart attack, stroke, and other types of cardiovascular disease. For 45 years, federal dietary guidelines have recommended that Americans eat less of them. The Department of Health and Human Services and the Agricultural Department update the dietary guidelines every 5 years. 2025's update has not been released yet. They historically rely on recommendations of an expert advisory committee that spends 2 years sifting through the latest research and issues a detailed report. The current expert committee published its report nearly a year ago and endorsed the existing recommendation for saturated fat. Americans should limit saturated fat intake to less than 10% of their daily calories starting at age 2, replacing with unsaturated fat, particularly polyunsaturated fat. It added that Americans should try to get their unsaturated fats from plant-based sources, which I would agree with. Kennedy's comments suggest that the Agriculture and Health and Human Services departments may ignore the committee's advice for 2025 dietary guidelines, said Eric Rim, a professor of epidemiology and nutrition at Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health. We all are waiting to read it. HHS Press Secretary Emily Hilliard said in an email, Secretary Kennedy is committed to new dietary recommendations that are rooted in rigorous science. The 2025 to 2030 dietary guidelines for Americans will be a big part of the Trump administration's commitment to make America healthy again. So there's just overwhelming data that seed oils are okay for you. And even saturated fats are fine for you if you don't eat them to the exclusion of everything else. As it said here, less than 10% of overall calories per day. Pretty easy recommendation. I forget who I was talking to, but I might not have been even talking to them. It might have just been a podcast I listened to. But at one point, they recommended that your 30% of your overall calories per day come from fat. 10% saturated, another 10% polyunsaturated, and then another 10% from wherever else. Monounsaturated, I think it would be, which actually is a decent recommendation. So in this article, they talk about what are saturated fats. Saturated fats include butter, lard, and shortening. They're typically solid at room temperature and are naturally found in beef, pork, and poultry. Full-fat dairy products like eggs, as well in coconut and palm oils. They're often added to processed foods like savory snacks, desserts, and prepared meals. Polyunsaturated fats, on the other hand, are typically liquid at room temperature, and they come in the form of oils. Canola, corn, soybean, and sunflower oils are high in polyunsaturated fat. So are oily fish like anchovies, herring, salmon, sardines, and striped bass. Some nuts and seeds, and soybeans, and tofu. Processed foods and fats and oils account for nearly 42% of saturated fat in the American diet. Dairy is the next largest source at about 28%, followed by meat at 22%. So to be clear, you probably don't want to get the vast majority of your dietary fat from oils. I know, as the guy who just voluntarily defends seed oils all the time, I don't eat a lot of seed oils. It's just the fact that the data is so overwhelmingly on their side that I can't sit here and tell you that they're not okay for you. That being said, you should probably strive to get lots of, healthy fats like nuts. You can even have lean animal proteins. That's fine. And lots of fish. Fish fat's good for you. Olive oil is good for you. Canola oil is good for you. They're all fine, but they're not good for you if that's all you eat and all you eat to the excess of other things. So let me continue on here. What's the evidence say about saturated fat and health? In its report last year, the Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee reviewed and randomized controlled trials as well as observational studies that followed thousands of people for decades. The research is pretty clear, said epidemiologist Cheryl Anderson, a committee member and the dean of the University of California, San Diego, Herbert Wertheim School of Public Health and Human Longevity Science. Geez, that's a lot. Decades of data show that eating saturated fat raises LDL cholesterol levels and contributes to cardiovascular disease. Too much LDL cholesterol, the so-called bad cholesterol, can combine with the fats of other substances to create a thick and hard substance called plaque that builds up in the inner walls of blood vessels, reducing blood flow. If you obstruct blood flow to a heart, you have a heart attack. If you obstruct blood flow to the brain, you have a stroke. Some of the committee's findings with the strongest scientific evidence are replacing butter with plant-based oils and spreads that contain mostly unsaturated fat decreases LDL cholesterol levels. Substituting whole grains, vegetables, or plant sources of protein for red meat is associated with a low risk of cardiovascular disease. I'd push back here and say that if you're going to have red meat, and particularly fatty red meat, just have fiber. Lots of fiber with it. Now, would you be as healthy as you could be if you just got a leaner steak? Probably, or probably not. But once again, we're talking about what's most optimal for the most amount of people. If you're just not willing to eat leaner meats, then okay, just get fiber with it. Replacing oils high in saturated fats with vegetable oils higher in unsaturated fat decreases LDL cholesterol. Substituting white meat for red meat is not associated with a difference in cardiovascular disease risk. Research about dairy, milk, cheese, and yogurt and cardiovascular disease health is limited, according to the committee, until more definitive studies are conducted. It advised the government continue to recommend that people eat fat-free or low-fat milk, yogurt, and cheese. So I think that's about all I wanted to get at here. Just kind of cover my bases there. I think that's about everything I wanted to cover today. I have a rant and rave about John Fetterman and some of the conservatives promoting him, but I'll probably say that for another time. Anyways, today's show, that was a lot. This is the longest stream I've done by myself. I kind of like doing these though, because once again, I don't have to worry about anybody else, and it's just me. Throat gets a little dry, getting used to it, talk fast. So hopefully you guys are entertained. Hopefully you learned something. Hopefully you like the stream, subscribe, all that good stuff. I greatly appreciate everybody being here. Thank you so much for 4 years of the In Liberty and Health podcast. Rachel, let me get to the start stuff. Rachel, thank you so much for becoming a channel member. And Conrail, thank you so much for your very, very, very generous super chat. I hope everybody has a fantastic week. I will be on 5 till midnight tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern time. So I will see all you guys there. Be on the lookout for the Great Megalodon and make sure you go subscribe to that. I always put a fun fact for subscribers in there. So make sure you, if you would feel so kind, donate $5 a month to see the fun fact. And I'll probably be expanding that here sooner or later. So I think that's about all I want to talk about. Make sure you like A Common Crown on Facebook as well. A couple shows coming up next year, and we'll definitely be scheduling more and more. No guests planned for this show, and I plan to keep it that way unless there's a guest that just wants to come hang out and shoot the shit on a Sunday. But yeah, I think that's it for now. So everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. And until next time, have a great